I'm at Castle Acre. This is probably my most visited castle that I've been to. It has been described as the most magnificent set of ruins in the country. It's a Motte and Bailey castle, although I would probably describe it as a Motte and Bailey castle on steroids. I have made a little video before. It was very windy that day, probably can't hear much. I'm on top of the Motte here, if you want to look down there. I believe this place was built by William de Wen, if that's pronounced right. There is a small river over there, which is in like a river valley. As you can see, we're in a river valley. A lot of people would have expected the castle to be up there on that hill line, whereas we're down here in the river valley. The reason is because of that river over there. One, it provides water, and two, it would also provide a certain amount of defence. I believe there may have been a building on this site earlier, and then the motte was built up around it. The usual procedure was to build a motte, was to dig a ditch and then pile the soil up to make the motte. But at this place, and there's a couple of other places where they've done the same thing, where there's an existing building, they build the soil up around the outside of it. And then they've extended on top of this one. Waiting for that jet to fly over. I mean, this is the motte that I'm on now. I mean, this thing is of a phenomenal scale. A lot of the mottes that were built that jet's either from Marham or Lakenheath. Oh, I can just see it up there, making a hell of a racket. Yeah, a lot of the Motte and Bailey castles, a lot smaller than this. This is on a super scale. There's lots of fortifications in England that we have a sort of, tend to call them castles, but a Motte and Bailey castle was one of the earliest forms of castle that we had in England. It consists of two parts, the Motte and the Bailey. The Motte is the large earth mound, which was primarily used as a lookout post and a point of refuge. It's a lookout point because of it's extremely tall, high up, normally in the landscape, and then you have a tower on top of that. You can normally see for miles around, and it's also a last place of refuge for the people that are living in the castle. People didn't normally live on the motte because mottes were normally quite small, unlike this motte, which is absolutely enormous. And as you can see, there are buildings inside, so those buildings would have housed the lord, his family, his retinue, his knights, etc., his squires, because of the sheer size of this place. A lot of mottes are a lot smaller than this. They would have had nothing more than a simple tower on top, which would have been used as a lookout point. They would have possibly had a wooden palisade round them, and if the castle was attacked and people were broke in to the Bailey, this is where you would come. You weren't normally going to be up here for too long. not in the early medieval period, when if the Anglo-Saxons were rebelling and attacking you, you would hope that your, just getting a bit windy there, you would hope that your allies in the local area would rush to your aid. There's memorial centres and other places around. I mean, in this area, I think over that direction, there's another large Motte and Bailey castle at Mileham. There aren't that many Motte and Bailey castles in Norfolk, certainly not compared to other counties in England. Norfolk is quite a big county, but there aren't that many. I don't think there's more than about 15. I could probably name most of them, but I'm not going to reel all them off at the moment. Just trying not to film too many people. They might not want to be in the video. So normally a motte is just a watchtower, place of refuge. The bailey is normally where people would live. In the bailey you would normally have a hall of some kind for the lord and his family, if he had a family, and his retinue. There would be a kitchen attached to it, possibly a buttery for making butter and cheeses. There may be a dovecote providing fresh meat. If the lord was rich enough, he might have a falconer. It's very expensive in them to have something like that, to keep hawks. There may be a small garden growing vegetables, herbs. They would keep certain animals, goats, sheep. They would probably be kept in during the day, kept in during the night and let out during the day into the local forests, etc. You might have a warrener looking after rabbits. Not necessarily in the castle itself, but just outside you might have fish ponds, providing you with another source of protein. I'll go around there and have a look down there in a minute, but you'll see how high this motte is and how steep the sides are. That's why it would be a place of refuge, because it would be extremely difficult to get into or get up to. Obviously this motte is almost 10 times the size of some of the smaller ones. Also in the bailey, one of the most important things you would have is the stables. Not only for the lord to keep his horses, but also for the garrison. We call them Norman knights, but they're not really knights, they're just cavalry. Very well trained, very well supplied, armoured and armed cavalry. There would be other soldiers in the castle, but their job would be primarily to guard the castle. the nights they would be out with the Lord, riding around in the countryside if he was out hunting or just out and about spreading a bit of mayhem. If you're an Anglo-Saxon in that period and you know that these Normans are riding around, you're less likely to cause trouble. And if you did cause a bit of trouble, you know that if you attacked this place, managed to get in, and the garrison went up into the motte and were holding out for a couple of days, you would know that other cavalry from the surrounding area, they would come, and you wouldn't want to be an Anglo-Saxon at that time. There may also be a blacksmith, depending on how big the castle was. I mean, this bailey's quite big, you could easily get a blacksmith in here. He would be looking after the garrison, looking after the horses, maintaining their weapons and armour. If you watch Hollywood films, every blacksmith was an armourer and a weaponsmith, and that's nonsense. Some blacksmiths probably never made a sword in their lives. Making a sword is an extremely complicated thing, and you need top grade metal. Most sort of village blacksmiths would be making stuff for the farms, local houses, a few nails, the odd hinge, and that type of thing. They wouldn't be making swords and armour like they always seem to be in medieval films. There could be all sorts of buildings inside the bailey. Depends on how big it was. Some of them might have had a little chapel. I need to turn the notifications off on my phone. Most motte and bailey castles, they have the motte, and then they have the bailey, the bit I'm standing in. The entranceway would normally be right opposite. In this place, the main entranceway is over there. Probably most people wouldn't come in that way. They would probably come in from over there. The reason they'd come in from over there is because I think it was a year or so after this place had been built, they actually built a fortified town of Castle Acre. You can still walk around the town and you can still see the fortifications. There would have been a gateway here into the town. There is still the Bailey Gate, which is over there, which you can still see today. And then there was another one further down there. Where that wall goes, it extends all the way along, or bits of it still do, and then you can see all the banks and ditches that go all the way around the outside of the castle, out of the little town. Over in that direction is Castle Acre Priory, and they stretch around there and then come all the way round. I mean, that gateway there may have been in a later addition to get into the town. This motte is quite impressive. There's a bridge there now, but that's been put in by English Heritage so you can get across. There may have been something similar in the medieval period. It was likely that it would have had a drawbridge. Over here, we have something called a barbican. That's not normally something that the smaller motte and bailey castles have. A barbican is just an additional area that is used to help protect the gate. The gateway being the weakest point, you would want to try and reinforce it. And by building that part there, if anybody did attack the gate, they would have to get through the barbican, and then they'd have to come down through the barbican, and then they'd have to attack the gate itself. See the way they built this with chalk, etc., which is very slippy. But you can see the very, very steep banks that you'd have to get down into that ditch and then come up here. It's walled off there to help protect this part here. This gateway would have been extremely difficult to attack and get in. You would need a lot of troops and a lot of will to try and get in through this gateway. It'd probably been better trying to break into the town and then trying to get in through that gateway over there, which is not as protected as this main gateway. As you can see, this motte here is huge. There is a, I think King's Lynn's probably over in that direction. Just outside King's Lynn there's a Motte and Bailey castle at a place called Middleton. That is a very small motte. The Bailey is all but gone. And it's just the motte remaining. If you go to Norwich, I think the motte at Norwich is probably bigger than this motte. And they've got a massive stone keep on the top. It's a square keep. And surprisingly, the Normans were thinking ahead because they've built a shopping mall underneath it. That's progressive thinking from the Normans. I think the first evidence of a Motte and Bailey castle being built, archaeological evidence, comes from the year 979, I think it is, at a place called Vichy, which is not in Normandy. I think it's in Anjou, because everybody attributes Motte and Bailey castles to the Normans, which they did build a lot of, and they did start building them when they came to England. The vast majority of them were built in England after 1066. A huge number went up in an initial building phase. The first Motte and Bailey castle in England was probably built in around 1050 though, at a place called Richard's Castle. Two more, one at Hereford and one at Ewis Harold, went up in the same year. There is another castle that was built at a place called Cleverling, which is in Essex. Those other three castles are all built in Hereford. Cleverling is in Essex, but that was more of an enclosure castle than a Motte and Bailey castle. There is a book by a gentleman by the name of, I think it's Terry Wardell, and I think in the book he suggests that a place called Burghill, which is to the west of Hereford, and that may have been the first Motte and Bailey castle built. But today there is no archaeological evidence on the ground of anything that was there. There may have been a mention of a mound, but whether that was a Motte and Bailey castle or not is, there's a lot of local archaeologists, etc., have debunked his idea, although he has got it in a book that it may have been the first Motte and Bailey castle. I think this one was built shortly after the Norman invasion. It was built because the building was already here, I think, but also there is an ancient trackway near here called the Peddar's Way, which goes all the way from the Norfolk coast down to Hertfordshire, I think it is, where it joins up with the Icknield Way, which then continues down to somewhere in Berkshire, which then picks up the Ridgeway, which goes all the way to the south coast. And I think when William came here, he had the Pedars Way diverted, so that it actually came past the castle, so that people would have to travel basically past the castle. But this is a magnificent place, and it's free to visit. And also you've got the town walls, you've got the priory just round the corner. This place is well worth a visit if you ever come here. Castle Acre Priory, what a magnificent place.